watched last week, you saw a video where I did lots of pattern alterations to a pattern I already had to make it more accessible, to make it so it could be pulled over the head for wearability for my mom. And this week we're going to sew it up. These are the fabrics. So this is a cotton, just like a quilter's cotton, a really nice quality one. This I'll put up links below where you can buy this fabric. And this is a little rib knit that is going to be the sleeve. So I'm cutting the body out of a woven and the sleeve out of a knit, and then I'm also going to do a little neckline casing, sort of like a crew neck, out of the knit. So it should be pretty straightforward. I'm also going to make a pocket. I'm going to wait to cut the pocket to see how the garment's going together so I can decide if I'm going to go ahead and do a pocket here or if I'm going to do more of a patch pocket down this way. I know this kind, the patch, is a little easier to use for my mom, but it's less flattering. So I want to make sure I have enough fabric if I need to do a patch pocket, or if I choose to do a patch pocket, I have enough of this fabric that I can match it up pretty well and make it not noticeable, because I don't want it to look, I don't want you really to see the pocket if possible. So I'm going to cut this out really quick. Here is my pattern right here. So I have not cut out a neckline pattern piece. I'm actually just going to measure the neckline once it's sewn and cut a strip for the neckline, and I'll explain it when I get there. But I've got my front, my back, and my sleeve, and the sleeve is the thing that got the most pattern alteration last week. And we're going to go ahead and cut this out. If you're working like I am with two different fabrics, one that's a knit and one that's a woven, the woven, this cotton woven, is going to get pre-treated. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm getting ready to go serge up this edge, throw it in the washer and dryer just like it's going to get treated afterwards. This is a synthetic knit, and knit, when pre-treated, when you pre-wash it, rolls up into a nice long skinny tube like you're making a sausage, and it makes it very difficult to work with. So I don't hardly ever pre-treat a knit, especially one like this where it's already a synthetic, so it's not going to shrink. So only this piece is getting pre-treated or pre-washed. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to cut out. I may show you a few pictures of cutting out, and then I'll meet you at the sewing machine. Cutting out the sleeve. This is the knit that I'm working with. It's like a rib knit, and it's very stretchy, which is lovely. So when you're cutting out knit like this, you want to make sure you don't stretch it, that it lays nice and flat, and that you didn't pull it at all when you go to put your pattern piece on, because if you stretch it and cut, things may not fit right. The pattern piece is expecting the fabric to lay nice and flat and not stretched when you work on it. So this is ready to go. And then I have lots of fabric left. Look, it's nice and wide, a nice big piece to cut out for my neck casing at the top. All right, I've cut the sleeve out, and now I have the back pinned on. This is the front. You can see I've folded over so that I have all of this preserved on the side that I can get pocket out of. And then there's enough at the bottom that I can get this. So I think I will do a patch pocket that sort of disappears. I'll just line up my pattern and cut out pockets. So get these two cut out, and then we'll be ready to cut pockets and put in darts. So I cut one patch pocket for the left side. She's left-handed, and I might cut one for the right side, but let me just show you how I did this. So here's where I want the pocket within the garment, and then I've laid this on here. Can you see how this matches right up? So even when I hem and turn under, I can find exactly where to line this all back up. So I just took a little time to line up the design of the fabric with my pattern pieces so that everything lines up right. So now I can serge it and go ahead and get my pocket made. I may go ahead and cut one for the other side too. I haven't decided. I'm going to get this one done though. So we're ready to sew, but we're going to do that tomorrow. It's a new day and we're ready to sew. Two things we're going to start with. I have taken my little, I'm only making one patch pocket, but I've serged around the outer edges so that I can get this prepped. I want to apply it to the front of the shirt before I really do any other construction. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the darts. So I've marked my darts already. This is the front of the shirt right here, and I'm going to show you how I line this up on my pattern, or on my front. I'm lining up the design so that it kind of disappears, and we're going to fold over this direction And I'm going to sew the top of the pocket on the corners here, and what that will do is it will finish off the top so I can flip it over and top stitch it, and it will set for me my seam allowance for the sides and the bottom. So I'm going to head over this direction and I'll show you that real quick, and then we'll be back at the sewing machine. Here's the front of my shirt. Here is my dart, and you can see I've marked it, so I'm going to sew that in just a second, but I'm going to get this pocket started first. So you can see how easily I can line this up. I cut this intentionally, lining everything up so that it kind of disappears when it's stitched on. So this is the placement of the pocket, and I'm going to just go ahead and fold down this at the top, and I'm going to stitch these little sides. So I'll see you over at the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch 3/8 of an inch from this folded edge down on each side, right here and here real quick. Then I'll go press it, and then I'm going to top stitch down in here to finish this edge off, and then it'll be ready to be pinned down and applied. So here it is stitched, and now we're going to just flip this around like this so that both corners are flipped, and I'll pull out my corners. So you can see this is how it looks. And from the back side now, I can give this a nice press, and I can go ahead and fold in my seam allowances. I'm going to get all of this pressed. Here's my pocket. I've got my top stitching. All my corners are turned under, and I'm ready to stitch it down. And I realized I did it backwards. This should be the bottom of the pocket, and this should be the top. So let me ask you, when I pull back, is it real noticeable? It isn't, is it? I think I'm going to leave it. I started to just take it all out, but the pattern isn't perfect as far as I can get the circles perfect. I can get this lined up fine, but you'll see this doesn't actually do that. I got a new design there, and this circle doesn't have any of the striping in it, so it should be flipped around. But I think I'm just going to leave it. This is really the one spot that is going to be the most noticeable, but I don't think it will be on the body when she's wearing it and walking around and so forth. So it's still pretty stinking invisible, I think. Going to apply my pocket now, and you can see here's my pocket, and I don't have it lined up perfectly straight because I'm going to actually sew out at an angle, sew across, and then sew down. It makes a little triangle at the top, makes it a little bit tighter across the top where your hand goes in, but I have a nice wide pocket. The other thing it does is make this pocket much more sturdy. Another thing you can do if you're really worried about your pocket getting a lot of pull, I'm not as worried because this is for my mom and she's just going to put her phone, maybe a tissue in it. But if it's for kids or for somebody who you know is really rough on their pockets, on the back side of these corners, you can actually reinforce by putting yet another layer behind there, an interfacing or something else, just to make this even sturdier on the back side, and that just helps keep your pockets strong, because what can happen is you've made your stitching so strong that it'll actually end up pulling the fabric apart and ripping your fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this one and show you what it looks like. And now I've got the beginning of my triangle. Can you see how that triangle started? And now I'm ready to just stitch straight down. And if you line it up right, they'll just kiss right there at the edge. And now I'm just going to stitch all the way down to this corner, up, and then when I get to this top part, I will do the triangle kind of in reverse. I'll come up, across, and over. So I have a pocket right here. Look, my pocket is on, and it does really disappear in there. Even though I didn't get the pattern exactly perfect, it's still nice. It's invisible enough for me. So there's my pocket. I'm going to go ahead and flip around and do my darts. If you have not done darts, or if darts make you a little nervous, or if you struggle with always having little pleats at the end of your dart, that sort of thing, I have a video just on darts, so I will link that for you, and you can just look for it up here in the corner and sew along with me and make darts. It's a sewing short. I have a few of those. So darts next, after we get, and I'm going to press it. After that, the shirt's going to go together really fast because it's a raglan, so I love that part. So we'll do darts, and then we'll start adding sleeves. We don't even have the sides together. That's what's neat about raglans. You do sleeve before you do sides. Okay, back in a minute. Darts are in and pressed down. This is the front of my bodice, and now I'm taking my sleeves and I'm pinning front of sleeve to front of bodice. So after I get these sewn on, then I'll do the same thing to the back. So you can see this is going to open up. Here's my neckline right along there. So once that's done, I'll be ready to do side seam, hem, and neckline, and I can kind of do them like the side seam and the hem have to go in that order, but I could actually do neckline next if I wanted to. So we're going to get all these sleeves serged in, and I'm just going to serge it right in. Because I'm doing a woven to a knit, I have to watch this knit. It's going to kind of want to move on me, and if it's on the bottom, I will have less movement. So I may go ahead, even though normally I would sew with the sleeve up, I may in this case sew with the sleeve down just for movement. My machine, my serger is pretty good about not giving me a lot of movement, but always better to be safe than sorry. Make sure you transfer your markings. Here's my little sleeve slit. Make sure you transfer your markings so that you don't sew the back of the sleeve to the front of the bodice too. Those markings really are helpful for that. Isn't that cute? So this is what the shirt's going to look like. Here's the bodice, here's the sleeve, there's the front of the sleeve in. It's overlocked. And I'm just stitching in the white or the ivory because it's going to shadow through less on the light parts. If I sewed this with the burgundy, it would shadow through on this lighter, the polka dot part, so I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to sew everything with the light color. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the back sleeve on now and onto the back of the bodice. So we're going to have a weird little circular thing happening, but I'll get that stitched on and then I'll show you how to do side seams. And I have to make some decisions about my side seams because I really think that I want to open up at the bottom and have a little bit of a slit in the hip for two things. One of them being it makes it easier to put on if it's not a super long tunnel that they have to crawl through to put on. So if I do a side slit, you still get the length of the garment, but it opens and makes it a little easier to put on. So I think that's what I'm going to do, which means I'm going to have to sew this seam, which normally you just start at the wrist and sew all the way down, is going to have to be sewn differently. So let me get the back sleeve in. All right, let me show you the progress so far. So here's our shirt. I'm showing you the inside. It looks like this right now. Okay, so here's a little head hole. So what the next step would be is I can either go ahead and sew the little neckline onto this, and I'm doing a crew neckline, or I can sew up this seam. Now to do the side seam, we're going to do that next because I just think it makes sense. I want to talk about it. I have gone around on all of the woven pieces and I've just serged that outer edge because I'm going to sew that at 5/8 of an inch and open it up for hemming. So I want a side slit. So I'll show you that up close in a minute, but so I've serged, I didn't bother serging the knit. The knit doesn't fray, it's not falling apart, I don't have to worry about it. I don't want the extra white thread on it. So to sew this up, however, I could serge this part together, stop at the underarm, and then sew that part at the sewing machine so that I can have a press open seam. Or I can sew the whole thing at the sewing machine, going from a zigzag to a straight stitch. I have options. I think what I will do though is I'm going to zigzag it with burgundy on the sewing machine for the sleeve because I don't want when the sleeve is pulled at the seam for those little white stitches to show. It's just a personal preference, but I think that's what I'm going to do. And then I will sew the ivory part with my ivory thread for my side seam on a straight stitch because it doesn't need to have a zigzag, it's woven, it won't pull. So I'm going to pin that together and sew those little underarm seams. I'll show you little close-ups of that. The other thing that I went ahead and did that I did not do when I was cutting out, I cut out my neckband, and while I was cutting out the neckband I thought, you know, it's a really easy way to hem the sleeve if I do like a little sleeve band, a little cuff on the sleeve. Now I'm not really worried about the cuff being tight or pulling in too much as not having to do a hem, a regular hem. So I cut out, this is my little neck, and I did go ahead and serge it with the serger earlier before I really started thinking through about changing my thread colors. So it won't show on the neckband that much at all. And actually, if I pull, you can see. But because it's going to get folded in half and stitched down, this is not going to get a lot of pull, and it's going to be in the back of the garment on top of that. For the sleeves, however, I cut them exactly the same width, so when the neck is sewn on, it's going to be just a little over 1 inch wide. And for the sleeves, it'll be the same thing. It'll be a little double band, a little folded over band on the sleeve, and it just finishes off. So I don't have to hem it at all. The only hemming I'll have to do is on the bottom of the shirt. And for the neckband, normally if it's a solid knit, you measure your garment, like especially if it doesn't come with a pattern. Like if you're doing like I am, where you're putting your garments together, multiple patterns, kind of fudging and making it up as you go. You measure that neckline, and then you make sure it'll go over your head first of all, because this is a woven and a knit together. So, which is why I did that, because if I did all woven, this wouldn't go over the head. Let me just show you. Because the sleeve pulls, it allows it to go over the head. The sleeve stretches. So I measured this opening, and then I cut my neck band just a tiny bit smaller, like 1 inch smaller. Just that, and all that's going to do is when it's sewn in, it makes it pull in nice and gives you sort of that little crew neck look. The sleeve, I wasn't even worried about that pulling in as much, but I'm kind of doing the same thing. It's about a 1 inch, just slightly smaller than the sleeve opening. When you're measuring it, make sure you don't stretch it. You just let it lay flat. You can even go and just measure the pattern piece instead of the garment, which is actually what I did. I measured my pattern pieces, because if you're working with something that's knit, if you move it wrong, you'll stretch it, you'll get the wrong measurement, and it won't come out right. So measure your pattern pieces if you have them instead of the garment pieces. You'll get a more accurate measurement for making those bands. So now we're going to fold this wrong sides out, right sides together. I'm going to pin here at the underarm, and I'm just going to sew this together. And because I want a side slit, I'm going to stop mid-hip, so about right here. So this is my little short side seam, and then this part will get pressed open and straight stitched and hemmed. So I'm going to do both of those with my ivory thread, and then I'm going to put on my burgundy thread, do the rest of the sleeve with a zigzag, and then I'll put on bands. So I'll show you all, because if I go ahead and sew the side seam, press it open, I can go ahead and hem it before I switch my thread color. So I may do that just to make life a little more streamlined for myself at the machine. Then we're going to come back and finish the sleeve and the neckline. So let me get that part done. We'll talk sleeve and neckline next. Inside of the shirt, here is my side seam. I've sewn to where I want my little side slit to start, and it's all serged and finished, and you can see here's where the sleeve starts, and I have not sewn any of that yet. Still needs a haircut, but I'm going to go ahead and just press this open like so, and press up my hem so that I can top stitch that. So I'm going to just press both sides, press over my little side slit hem and the bottom hem, and top stitch all of that in, and then we'll come back and finish up our sleeves and our neckline. I'm getting ready to hem. I pressed open my side seams, and here's my little side slit, and you can press this so that you can see it at the side, or you can press it so it goes down to the bottom, which would be the better choice. But what I'm actually going to do, I've pressed it just so I can see those little fold lines, and then I'm going to actually turn this and stitch where those two fold lines meet, and what happens is it makes a mitered corner inside there. Here's my pressed up little side slit, and this is the hem. I've just pressed them, and I've laid them on top of each other so the little fold lines match up so I can see it, and then I'm going to stitch right across this so that when I flip it around, I'll have a mitered corner. So we're going to stitch that really quick, and then I'll show you how it looks. Okay, I've stitched it, so can you see I've made a little triangle here? This is where I've stitched, so that when I flip it around, now that's my little mitered corner, and now I can top stitch everything. So I'm going to do all 4 little corners just like that. So here's the pretty little mitered corners from the inside and from the outside. It just makes a nicer finished look. So at the side seam here, on the inside, it's going to look like that. And the outside it'll look like, well, I haven't top stitched it. They'll be top stitching. but it's prettier. It looks more. The hem and the little side slit, just top stitched. That's what it looks like from the back side. And there you can see the pocket top stitched on. So now I'm ready to switch to my burgundy-ish red thread and a zigzag, and I'm going to go ahead and sew up my sleeves. Just a quick little close-up of the teeny tiny zigzag that I did. Can you see how small that is? But it's nice and stretchy. It's not a satin stitch because it's more spread out, but it's nice and stretchy and strong. That's what I used for my sleeve. And then it's a straight stitch down here. You can see here's my transition zigzag to straight stitch, and it's 5/8 of an inch. So now I've gone ahead and I've made my cuffs for my sleeve, and there's my neckband. The cuffs I'm going to go ahead and zigzag on at the machine, but the neckband I'm going to serge because of this. I don't want this to fray, so I want serger stitches on it. And I also don't want burgundy stitching on this ivory. I would rather have it show through on this. It's just a personal preference, but that's what I'm going to do. If I see that it's really bad and pulling a lot, I may come back and do a second stitch of zigzagging along there, but I don't want too much stitching on my knit. All right. Going to apply those things. I'll be back in a minute to show you how I pinned them on. Here's my little sleeve. I've just opened up that zigzag seam and I've set inside. I folded over my band in half and I've just pinned it around on the inside. Now my band is close to the same dimension as my sleeve opening. You can make it tighter if you want more of a pulled in fitted band around the arm. I don't want mine really fitted, so I didn't make mine that much smaller. It's really a personal choice in what you want. You just don't want it bigger. It should always be the same size or smaller. And now I'm ready just to come to the sewing machine. I'm just going to zigzag around it. I'm only going to do a 1/4 inch stitch around it instead of a full 5/8, just so I have a wider band. It's at the hem and I shortened it a little bit anyway. So we're good to go for that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the neckline. I'm going to pin it on. But for that one, I'm going to serge it. And again, I want to serge it at the 1/4 inch. I could serge it at 5/8, but I didn't cut my band for a 5/8 inch seam allowance, so I've trimmed off a little bit of the neckline instead, so that they will come out right. So I'm going to pin on my neckline and my little bands and stitch them, and my garment's done. Here's our little sleeve cuff. Here's the other. So you can see it pulls it in just a little bit, but it gives it a nice finished edge, and I don't have to try and top stitch a hem or anything. If you don't want to do a cuff like this, you could easily do a double needle stitch on your machine, and that's a nice way to do a finished edge. If you have a cover stitch, you could do a cover stitch. So I'm going to now tuck all this in and pin on my neckline. I'm going to take the one seam that I have for my band, and I'm going to put it in the center back here, so that it's just in the least obvious place, and then 1/4 it, pin it on, serge it, and we'll be done. So here's the finished little top. I went ahead and threw it on. It's for my mom, and she's a little smaller than I am, so it's a little snug in the hip for me. It'll be looser on her, but it fits great. It has one pocket. I did a left hand pocket because she is left-handed, so that's just easier for her. So I did that, and I'm really pleased that I chose to do a little cuff binding instead of trying to hem it. This is such a soft knit that I think hemming it might have given me more issues. And I like the little mound neckline. It turned out really cute. It was pretty fast to sew. I made it all up in the morning. I'm getting ready to go eat lunch, so I've done all of this morning before I go eat. So cute, easy, pretty simple. So you might give it a try. Mix a woven and a knit into one project and try something new. Alright, I'll see you next week for another fun video. And again, I mixed knit and woven. Looks like I'm doing the Macarena. I did mix knit and woven.